Hello, welcome to the series of AI videos. Today we are going to talk about Langgraph 101. Okay, so we'll quickly get started with Langgraph with this video. Okay, so as you know, Langgraph basically has a notion of uh, graphs, edges, nodes. Okay, so this is a simple graph that we're going to look at today, right? So let me head over to my VS Code, and this is my simple graph, right? Which is what we'll see first. So I'll just walk you through how it is set up, right? So first it has a state. So we are going to use a type dictionary, right? So the name of the key of the dictionary is graph state, right? And the value would be the string that we put in there. Okay, now we are going to have a conditional edge. Okay, so this conditional edge, depending on a state, it's going to take you either to node 2 or node 3. Okay, so it first takes the state, right? And now just going to use a random number. So if the random number is less than 0 0.5, it will go to node 2, otherwise it will go to node 3. Okay, now node 1 basically it adds I am to the state, right? So these nodes are just going to add to the string that is there in the state, right? Node 2 says happy, right? So it basically adds space happy, and node 3 adds space sad. Okay, so as you walk through this graph, you'll either see I am happy or I am sad, depending on the random number. Okay, so now let's get started building the graph. So we start with the builder, right? So the builder is a state graph with the state. Okay, then you add a node 1, then you add node 2, node 3. Okay, and then the start node is node 1, right? So from start we go to node 1. Okay, then we add the conditional edge, right? From the node 1, and the edge is decide mode, right? So either it takes to node 2 or node 3, right? And then from node 2 and node 3 we go to the end. Okay, then the next thing you do is you compile the graph. Okay, right now there are two ways you can execute. Either you can call a invoke, right, or you can use the streaming, right? So use this graph.stream, right? And you basically walk through the graph. Okay, so what we'll do is so basically is the first way of sort of executing the graph, right? Either a invoke or a stream, right? A streaming API. Okay, and I'll just run this, right? So I have already run it. So I'll show you how does it look, right? So now I ran this simple.py, right? So when the first execution happened, which is invoke, right? It basically said it first went to node 1 and then it went to node 3. Okay, so actually Langgraph documentation says that it should also print the last state after this, right? Somehow it doesn't print it, voila, or whatever it is. Okay, now the second way of executing is through the streaming, right? So with streaming, you basically start with this is Samir, right? So which is what I put as my initial state, right? If you see, hi, this is Samir is my initial state. Okay, so from that it went to node 1. No, now node 1 added I am. Okay, now the random number generated greater than 0 0.5. So in this case, it went to node 3, right? And so the last state is hi, this is Samir, I'm sad, right? Uh, so as you can see in both these executions, it went from node 1 to node 3. Okay, cool. So now that is one way of executing this Langgraph graph, right? Obviously, first you have to compile, right? Then you either do a invoke or you sort of step through the streaming API, right? Each one of this is an event, right? Each one of is a state transition from one node to another. Okay. Now there is another interesting way of working with LangGraph, and it's called deployment, right? So for the deployment, what you do is you set up the graphs that you have written, right? So it has to be everything on the left hand side plus this builder.compile, okay, so that you get a graph, okay. Now I'll just show you one of my directory structure, right? So say for example, I'm going to do it for my module one, right? So in my module one, I have set up agent, right? I have set up router and I have set up simple, right? So I basically you set up these files. Now next thing you do is you create a langgraph.json, right? Now what do you have in here? The langgraph.json, it basically says what are the graphs, right? So if it is simple graph, you invoke simple.py, right? And you use the graph. So what is the object or the variable that you want to invoke, right? So you can actually uh, name this as something other than graph, for example, okay. Uh, so it has a simple graph, router, agent, right? So just remember this. So we'll come back to this. And there are some other things, okay. You set up the langgraph.json and then you run langgraph space dev, right? So I have run this, right? So from this particular folder where you have set up this module 1 studio, I set up these files. So I ran langgraph dev. So now what it does is it's basically running a web server, okay. And it hosts the API at this URL and the studio, Langgraph Studio at this URL, right? It also points to documentation, right? But you'll see all this, right? So it basically started. Now, uh, I have also executed a lot of stuff, so that's why you see this. But what does it mean? Like, after I have done the deployment, what does it mean to us? That you can connect to it using a API, right? Now that URL was this, right? So you basically use the Langgraph SDK, you get a client, right? And then you can make calls. Okay, so let me just show you some of the API that we are going to run, right? So if you go to my API, right? Now since this is a await, right? It has to be using async IO, right? So that's why I'm doing this in a async main, right? My standard async IO stuff. Now here I'm going to use this agent, right? And I'm going to use the streaming API, right? So I'm going to use the client.runs.stream, right? And then I'm going to print this, right? So now I'll just show you the execution, right? So this was our simple pie, right? This was our Langgraph dev, right? So now I have run this API, right? Now it's a little cryptic. I mean, we could try to do a pretty print and all, but uh, we'll also run it through the Langgraph Studio. It will be more visually appealing. But here I'm saying multiply 3 by 2, right? And it's kind of a chatbot, right? So it walks through this, figures out it needs to make a call to a tool, right? Which is implemented called multiply, right? And the final answers is what you get, right? So it will say that uh, 2 multiplied by 3 is 6, okay. So this is the result of multiplying 3 by 2 is 6, okay. So this is one way of executing, right? After deployment you use the API, right, through this get client Langgraph SDK. Now we'll go to the most interesting part, right, which is basically a Langgraph Studio, right? So as we saw when we ran this, right, it said that uh, Langgraph Studio URL is basically what I put here, right? It's just smith.langchain.com, but it's on the local host, right? 127.0.0.1 on the port 2024, right? So now, if I go to that port, right? In fact, when you run Langgraph dev, it will automatically open that URL for you, right? So now, if I go to that URL, voila, this is what you see right now. What I'll do is uh, let me switch. So I have already executed this. So let me switch to this simple graph that we had before, right? So simple graph, right? Now it actually also shows the graph in interesting way, like a start node, a node 1, a node 2, node 3, right? Uh, and end, right? So now let me say hi, right? And I'll just do a submit, right? So now you'll see this execution happening on the right hand side, right? So it did a hi, right? It went to node 1, right? What did node 1 do? It added I am, right? So it said hi, I am, right? And then it went to node 3, right? So that's why it added a sad, right? So it said hi, I am sad. Okay, as simple as that. Now we'll go back to this agent, right? And we'll now, as I said, we'll try this. This is more interesting to see visually. So I'll say whatever we ran through the API, we run through this Langgraph Studio, multiply 3 by 2. Right now, what I'm doing here is I'm actually using a local Olama. So in my Olama, I have hosted different models. So I'm using the Llama 3.1 because that supports tool use, right? So let me also quickly show you the code for this agent. uh, it's not very complex, but it's a little more interesting than our simple graph, right? So all that I have done is I have added a tool which basically does add, multiply, and divide, right? And these are the tools: add, multiply, divide, right? Which is what I provided to the LLM. So I'm using my local Olama with Llama 3.1, which supports tools, right? I bind these tools, right? And basically this is my system message, right? And now when I said multiply, right, it will figure out that it's some sort of a tool use required, right? So we'll see that, right? So this was human message, right? It went to assistant, right? Assistant figured out, oh, okay, I need to call the tool multiply, right? Already. Then it made the tool call, right? Which is what you'll see here, right? And it returned 6, right? And that's why the assistant said the result of multiplying 3 by 2 is 6. Okay, so we kind of started with a simple graph, right? We built the graph, we compiled it, we saw different ways of executing, right? In notebook or local Python script with the graph.invoke or a streaming API, right? We also saw how to deploy it using Langgraph dev, right? You need to set up the sort of graphs as these Python files, create a langgraph.json that we saw, right? Then we ran it, right? Now after you run the Langgraph dev, right, it gets hosted, right? Now you can connect to it either at this URL, which is the API URL, and use the get client from the Langgraph SDK API, right? You can use a API call to create a thread and a streaming API, right? And the last but not the least is the Langgraph Studio, right? Which is visually also appealing. Okay, so good luck using Langgraph. In the next video, we'll see more details and advanced topics of Langgraph.